The judge read the verdict. Guilty. Until my mom stood up in the courtroom and shouted, "I did it!" The sound of her voice echoed in the silent room. It was a crack of lightning in a dead sky. Everything stopped. The judge froze, his mouth slightly open. The bailiffs turned, confused. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, put a hand on my arm, his fingers digging into my sleeve. I could feel a tremor run through him. I just sat there, unable to move, unable to breathe. My father's face was a mask of pure, cold fury. My brother, Mark, looked like he had been struck. He stared at our mother, his perfect, handsome face pale with shock. For a single long moment, nobody moved. It was a painting of horror and disbelief. Then the chaos began. The judge started banging his gavel. Reporters in the back gallery scrambled to their feet. My mom just stood there, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her chin held high. She looked directly at me, and in her eyes I saw a storm of regret, love, and a terror so profound it made my own fear feel small. But this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan. My plan was colder. My plan was sharper. Her desperate, loving, and utterly misguided confession was about to ruin everything. I had spent months building a cage for my father and brother, and my mother had just thrown herself in front of it. It all started 6 months ago, on a Tuesday that felt like any other. I was working from my small apartment, plugging away at my graphic design projects. My life was simple, and I liked it that way. I had a good relationship with my clients, a few close friends, and a family that I kept at a careful distance. A distance that was necessary for my own peace of mind. My family life had always been a complicated thing. My older brother, Mark, was the sun around which our family revolved. He was brilliant, charming, and successful. He had started his own tech company straight out of college, and my father swelled with pride every time his name was mentioned. I, on the other hand, was the quiet moon. I was the responsible one, the steady one, the one who never made waves. My parents loved me, I suppose, but it was a different kind of love. It was a quieter, more conditional affection. Mark got praise for his ambition. I got nods for my compliance. He was the family's soaring eagle. I was its sturdy fence post. It was a role I had accepted long ago because fighting it was just too exhausting. The phone call that shattered my life came from my dad. His voice was tight, strained. "Clara, you need to come over to the house, now." There was no greeting, no preamble, just a command. I felt that old, familiar knot tighten in my stomach. "What's wrong, Dad?" I asked. "Just get here," he said, and the line went dead. I drove the 20 minutes to my parents' house with a growing sense of dread. The house was the same one I grew up in, a large brick colonial in a neighborhood where appearances were everything. When I walked in, the scene in the living room was tense. My father was pacing in front of the fireplace. My mother was sitting on the sofa, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Mark was slumped in an armchair, his head in his hands. He looked broken. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My father stopped pacing and pinned me with his gaze. His eyes were like chips of ice. "Your brother's company has been compromised. There's been a theft. A significant amount of money is gone." I looked at Mark. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Oh my God, Mark, I'm so sorry. Who did it?" My dad took a step closer to me. His voice was low and menacing. "The police are looking into it. The transactions were traced. They were made using your credentials, Clara." The world tilted on its axis. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "That's impossible. I haven't accessed Mark's company servers in years. Not since I helped him design the initial website." "The logs don't lie," my father said flatly. "Your username, your password. It was you." I stared at him, my mind reeling. No. No, that can't be right. Someone must have stolen my information, hacked me. "Mark, you know I wouldn't do this." I turned to my brother, pleading with him. He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, but there was something else in them. Not just sorrow. something shuttered and cold. I don't know what to think, Clara. The evidence is all there. Evidence? I choked out the word. What evidence? The digital trail is undeniable. My dad cut in, his voice leaving no room for argument. The police have a warrant. They're going to want to talk to you. My mother made a small, wounded sound. Robert, please, she whispered. My father shot her a look that silenced her instantly. He turned back to me. This family is facing a crisis. Your brother's reputation, his entire future is on the line. Everything we've built is at risk. I felt like I was drowning. But I didn't do it. You have to believe me. Belief is irrelevant right now, he said. Facts are what matter, and the facts point to you. That was the beginning. The interrogation, the charges, the slow, methodical dismantling of my life. My name was dragged through the mud. My clients dropped me. My friends grew distant, unsure of what to believe. Through it all, my family presented a united front to the world, a family devastated by the betrayal of one of its own. My father hired a lawyer for me, a man whose loyalty was clearly to him, not to me. He advised me to plead guilty, to take a deal. He said it was the best way to minimize the damage. I refused. I knew I was innocent, and I would not admit to a crime I did not commit. But as the days turned into weeks, a creeping, horrible suspicion began to grow in my mind. The password they said was used was an old one I hadn't used in years. But it was one my family knew. I had once written it down on a piece of paper for Mark when he needed emergency access to a shared photo album. I remembered leaving that paper in the drawer of the desk in the family study. I was out on bail, confined to my small apartment, my world shrinking with each passing day. One night, unable to sleep, I drove to my parents' house. I let myself in with my old key, needing to retrieve some childhood photo albums, or so I told myself. What I was really looking for was that piece of paper. I went to the study. The desk was a massive mahogany thing, my father's pride and joy. I opened the drawer where I had left the note. It was gone. Of course it was gone. But as I was about to close the drawer, I saw something else. A flash drive tucked into the back corner. I hesitated, my heart pounding. This was my father's private desk. He would be furious if he knew I was snooping. But something compelled me. My life was already in ruins. What more could I lose? I took the flash drive. Back in my apartment, I plugged it into my laptop. It was mostly filled with boring business documents and spreadsheets. But there was one folder labeled Family. Inside, I found copies of old emails. My father was meticulous about record keeping. He saved everything. I scrolled through them, my heart sinking with each one. They were all about Mark. Mark's achievements, Mark's future, Mark's importance. Then I found it. An email that had been deleted from my father's main account but saved here, on this drive. It was a backup he must have forgotten about. The email was from him to Mark, sent just 2 days before the money went missing. The subject line was simple. The plan. I clicked it open, my hands shaking. The message was short, brutal, and clear. Mark, your mother and I have discussed it. The numbers are too deep. You can't recover. We will proceed as planned. The accounts are set up. Use Clara's old login. She's the only viable option. She'll take the fall. She always does. This is the only way to protect the family and your future. Don't be weak. Your grandfather would have understood the necessity of sacrifice. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. The words blurred through a haze of tears. Sacrifice. I was the sacrifice. My entire life, my future, my name, all offered up on the altar of my brother's success and my father's pride. It wasn't just that they had framed me. It was the cold, calculated way they had done it. The casual cruelty of the line. She'll take the fall. She always does. It implied a lifetime of this, a pattern of me being the shock absorber for every family crisis. And I had been too blind, too eager for their approval, to see it. The grief was a physical blow. It knocked the wind out of me, left me gasping on the floor of my apartment. But as the hours passed, the grief began to cool. It hardened into something else, something cold and sharp. It hardened into resolve. They thought I was a lamb to be slaughtered. They were about to find out I was a wolf. I saved a copy of the email to a secure cloud server. Then I deleted it from the flash drive and wiped my laptop's history. The next day, I put the flash drive back in the desk drawer, exactly where I had found it. They would never know I had seen it. This email was my secret. It was the first piece of the cage I would build. They had underestimated me my entire life. They had mistaken my quiet nature for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I was no longer interested in keeping the peace. I was interested in justice. My justice. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur of calculated moves. I fired the lawyer my father had hired. I found Mr. Harrison, a sharp, hungry litigator who specialized in wrongful convictions. I paid his retainer with the last of my savings, money I had been putting away for a down payment on a house. A house I would likely never own if I lost this case. I, 26F, Clara, was about to go to war with my own family. My only real friend, Sarah, 26F, was my rock. She was the only person I told everything to, the only one who saw the raw, unvarnished truth. "Are you sure about this, Clara?" she asked me one night, her face etched with worry. We were sitting in my tiny kitchen, the damning email open on my laptop screen between us. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. They left me no other choice. "But your mom?" She started, her voice gentle. "Do you think she knows? Really knows the details?" I thought about my mother's haunted eyes, her trembling hands. She knows something is wrong. She knows I'm innocent. But she's terrified of my father. She's been his shadow for 30 years. I don't know if she's a victim or an accomplice. That was the question that tormented me. "So what's the plan?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "The plan is to let them think they're winning," I said. "I'm going to let them walk into that courtroom feeling confident, smug even. I want them to look the judge in the eye and lie. And then, when they are at their most arrogant, I'm going to pull the pin." Sarah looked at the email on the screen. "This is a grenade, Clara, not a pin." I smiled, but it was a cold, unfamiliar expression. "I know," I said, "and I'm going to enjoy watching it go off." The first step was to play the part of the defeated daughter. I stopped fighting back in conversations. When my father would call, his voice dripping with false concern, I would sound weary and resigned. "Clara, I've spoken with the district attorney's office through our contacts," he said one afternoon. "They are still willing to offer you a plea bargain. 2 years probation, community service, no jail time. It's a generous offer. It would put all of this behind us." "Behind us?" I asked, my voice flat. "It would be on my record forever. I'd be a convicted felon." "It's better than the alternative," he said sharply. "A jury could give you 5 years in prison, maybe more. Don't be a fool. This is the best path forward for everyone." For everyone. He meant for him and Mark. I took a deep breath, forcing the anger down. "I need to think about it," I said meekly. "There's nothing to think about," he snapped. "You will take the deal. It's your duty to this family to end this mess." "I'll think about it, Dad," I repeated, and hung up before he could argue more. The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth. Duty. Sacrifice. My entire life had been defined by those words. Next, I had to deal with Mark. He called me a few days later, his voice oozing with synthetic sympathy. "Clara, how are you holding up?" he asked. "How do you think I'm holding up, Mark?" I replied, letting a bit of my real frustration show. He sighed dramatically. "I know this is hard. It's been a nightmare for all of us. The company is barely staying afloat. My investors are spooked. This has ruined me. He was playing the victim. It was a role he had perfected over the years. My anger flared, hot and quick. I wanted to scream at him, to read the email out loud over the phone. But I held back. Not yet. I'm sorry this is so hard for you, I said, my voice dripping with an irony he completely missed. Thanks, Clara, he said, his tone brightening. I knew you'd understand. Listen, Dad told me about the plea deal. You have to take it. It's the only way we can start to rebuild. Once this is over, I promise I'll help you get back on your feet. I'll make sure you're taken care of. The empty promise of a liar. He was offering me scraps from the table he had stolen. It took every ounce of my self-control not to laugh in his face. I'll consider it, Mark, I said. Good, that's good, he said, relieved. You're doing the right thing. For the family. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The cage was taking shape. Their arrogance was the foundation. Each lie they told was another bar in the door. My mother was the wild card. She would call and say nothing of substance. She'd ask if I was eating, if I was sleeping. Her voice was always thick with an unspoken sorrow. One afternoon, she came to my apartment. She stood at the door holding a container of soup. I made your favorite, she said, not meeting my eyes. Thanks, Mom, I said, taking the container. Her hand trembled as it brushed against mine. She looked up at me then, her eyes swimming with tears. Clara, I am so sorry. My heart ached. Here it was, the moment of truth. Sorry for what, Mom? I asked gently, trying to draw her out. Sorry that I'm in this position? She flinched. I wish things were different. They can be, I said, my voice firm. You know I didn't do this. You know it. You could tell them. You could tell the truth. She pulled her hand back as if burned. Fear washed over her face, erasing the sorrow. I can't, she whispered, shaking her head. Your father, we just have to get through this. Get through it by letting me go to prison? I asked, my voice rising. It won't come to that, she said quickly. The plea deal, probation, it's not so bad. She was parroting my father's lines. She was in on it. Maybe not the planning, but the cover-up. She knew, and she was choosing them. The last bit of hope I had for her support withered and died. The pain of that particular betrayal was sharper than any other. I felt my face harden. I'm not taking the deal, Mom. Her eyes widened in panic. You have to. Clara, please, don't fight him on this. You don't know what he's like when he's cornered. Oh, I think I'm starting to get a very clear picture, I said coldly. You should go. I have a lot to prepare for. I closed the door on her stricken face. There was no more room for pity. She had made her choice. She was part of the conspiracy, a silent partner in my destruction. That night, I called Mr. Harrison. They're all pushing for the plea deal, I told him. They think I'm going to fold. Good, he said, his voice crisp over the phone. Let them think that. Did you get anything else? My mother practically admitted she knows I'm innocent but is too scared of my father to speak up, I said. That's useful, he said. It establishes a pattern of coercion and control within the family. We can use that to support our narrative, but the email is still our bombshell. We hold it until the last possible second. What about the money trail? I asked. The prosecution's evidence seems so clean. It's too clean, he said. That's what bothers me. A real embezzler, especially a first-timer, makes mistakes. They get greedy, they get sloppy. This trail is a perfect, straight line pointing directly to you and stopping. It's a narrative, not a crime. I'm going to hire a forensic accountant, someone who can dig deeper than the police did. That was another expense I couldn't afford, but I agreed. We had to follow every thread. The forensic accountant, a woman named Ms. Albright, was a genius. She worked for days, poring over the digital transaction logs. She found what the police had missed, or perhaps what they hadn't been encouraged to look for. She called me and Mr. Harrison for a meeting. She laid out a series of charts on a conference table. "The prosecution's report is accurate as far as it goes," she began. "The money was transferred from Mark's company account to a series of offshore crypto wallets, and from there, it vanished. The initial transfers were all made using Ms. Thorne's credentials." She nodded at me. "But," she continued, tapping a chart with her pen, "they stopped digging there. I looked at the broader financial ecosystem around the company, Mark Thorne's personal accounts, your father's accounts, and I found something interesting." She pointed to a new set of diagrams. While large sums of money were flowing out of the company, very small, seemingly random amounts of money were flowing back in. Not to the company, but to a separate dormant account. "Whose account is it?" Mr. Harrison asked, leaning forward. "It was opened 15 years ago," Ms. Albright said. "It belongs to a holding company, and the holding company is registered to a man named Arthur Vance." The name meant nothing to me, but Mr. Harrison's eyes lit up with recognition. "Arthur Vance," he said slowly. "Robert Thorne's first business partner. They had a nasty split decades ago. Vance accused your father of cheating him out of his share of their first company." My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we have a loose thread," Mr. Harrison said, "and I want to pull it." The next week was spent trying to find Arthur Vance. He had fallen off the map years ago. Mr. Harrison hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Costello. Costello was good at finding people who didn't want to be found. While he worked, the trial date loomed. My family's pressure campaign intensified. My father left me a final voicemail. "Clara, this is your last chance. I've been informed that you have rejected the plea agreement. I don't know what foolish game you're playing, but you need to stop. If you try to fight this in court, you will lose, and you will do it alone. The family will not support you. We will not be there. You will be on your own. Think about that. Think about what it means to be truly alone." The threat was clear. He was disowning me. A year ago, that would have shattered me. Now it just fueled my anger. He thought being alone was my greatest fear. He had no idea that being free of him was my greatest hope. The day before the trial was set to begin, Costello called. "I found him," he said. "Arthur Vance. He's living in a small town in Oregon. He's not a rich man. It seems your father did get the better of him all those years ago." "Is he willing to talk?" Mr. Harrison asked, who was on the conference call with us. "He's more than willing," Costello said. "He's been waiting for a phone call about Robert Thorne for 20 years. He says your dad is a snake, and he's not surprised he's roped his own kids into his schemes." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. "Did he know anything about the current situation?" I asked. "He knew more than that," Costello said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. "Vance and your father have had some contact over the years. Your dad would call him occasionally, mostly to gloat about his success. Vance, for his part, started recording their calls a long time ago. He said he was hoping to one day catch your dad admitting to how he cheated him." Mr. Harrison and I were silent. "He never got that confession," Costello continued. "But he got something else. A few months back, your dad called him. He was in a panic. He talked about how Mark had nearly bankrupted the new company with some bad investments. He was trying to figure out a way to hide the losses." My breath hitched. "And then," Costello said, his voice dropping, "your father laid out a plan to stage an embezzlement, a way to declare a catastrophic loss, collect on an insurance policy, and blame it all on a scapegoat to avoid SEC investigation." "Did he name the scapegoat?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice tight. There was a pause. "Oh, yeah," Costello said. "He named her. He said, and I'm quoting from the transcript Vance sent me, 'My daughter, Clara. She's the perfect choice. She's naive and she'll do anything we ask if we tell her it's for the family. Clara is strong. A little probation won't break her. But if Mark goes down, the family name is ruined.'" The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. It was worse than the email. Hearing the words spoken, hearing the cold calculation in my father's voice as described by Costello, was a new level of horror. He hadn't just decided to frame me. He had analyzed my personality, my love for my family, and used it as a weapon against me. He had judged me strong enough to endure the ruin he was planning for me. "Mr. Costello," Mr. Harrison said, his voice dangerously calm. "Please get a copy of that recording to me immediately. Whatever it costs." "It's already on its way," Costello replied. After the call ended, I sat with Mr. Harrison in his office. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. I finally had it all. The email, the financial trail leading to my father's old partner, and now a recording of my father confessing his entire plan. "He called me strong," I whispered, the words tasting like poison. "He thought that was a compliment." Mr. Harrison looked at me, his expression serious. "He didn't say you were strong, Clara. He said you were useful. There's a difference. He saw your strength as a resource to be exploited. His mistake was in thinking it had a limit." He was right. My father and brother thought they had pushed me to my breaking point. They thought they had me trapped, defeated, and ready to be sacrificed. "So, what do we do now?" I asked. "Do we show this to the DA? Get the case dismissed?" Mr. Harrison shook his head slowly. "No. The DA's office is compromised. Your father mentioned his contacts. They'll try to bury this. They'll claim the recording is fake, inadmissible. They'll protect their own. We can't give them the chance to spin this before it sees the light of day." He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. "We let the trial proceed. We let them get comfortable. We let the prosecution present their case. We let your father and brother sit there watching you get convicted. We need them to believe they've won. We need the verdict." "The verdict?" I was confused. "But if the verdict is guilty—" "A guilty verdict is a legal event," he explained. "It triggers a new phase of the proceedings, sentencing, appeals. But more importantly, it creates a moment of finality in the courtroom, a moment where your family believes the story is over. And in that exact moment, when their guard is completely down, we introduce a motion for a mistrial based on new, exculpatory evidence that was deliberately withheld by members of the prosecution's key witnesses, namely, your father and brother." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "We're not just going to get you exonerated, Clara. We're going to do it in the most public, most humiliating way possible for them. We will play that recording in open court. We will detonate this in front of the judge, the press, and the world. We will not give them an inch of ground to hide." A cold, clean fire burned in my chest. It was a terrifying plan. It meant I had to sit there and be branded a criminal. I had to listen to a judge declare me guilty. But the thought of my father's and brother's faces when that recording played, it was worth it. "Okay," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Let's do it." The trial was a surreal nightmare. I sat at the defendant's table, a picture of quiet composure. Inside, my nerves were screaming. Mr. Harrison was calm and methodical. He cross-examined the prosecution's witnesses with precision, poking small holes in their testimony but never revealing our hand. My father and Mark were called as witnesses for the prosecution. They played their parts perfectly. My father was the stoic, heartbroken patriarch, forced to testify against his own daughter for the sake of truth and justice. He spoke of his love for me, and how my alleged betrayal had shaken the foundations of their family. He looked at the jury, his eyes filled with manufactured pain. "I love my daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But the law is the law. The truth must be served." I watched him, my heart a block of ice. I felt nothing. No pain, no sadness, just a profound and empty detachment. He was a stranger to me. Mark was even better. He was the wounded golden boy, his dreams shattered. He wept on the stand as he recounted discovering the theft. He talked about how he had always looked up to me, how he couldn't understand how his own sister could do this to him. She was always the responsible one, he said, wiping away a tear. I never would have believed she was capable of this. The jury was captivated. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. I was the serpent in the garden, the jealous sibling who had tried to tear down her successful brother. The narrative my father had crafted was working perfectly. I could see the smug satisfaction in his eyes every time he glanced at me. He thought he had me. He thought he had won. Mr. Harrison's cross-examination of Mark was brief. He didn't challenge his emotional display. He just asked a few simple questions. Mr. Thorne, your company was facing some financial difficulties before the alleged embezzlement, wasn't it? Mark stiffened. All startups face challenges. We were navigating a difficult market. Difficult enough that you were at risk of insolvency? Mr. Harrison pressed. Mark's lawyer objected and the judge sustained it. But the question hung in the air. When it was my turn to testify, I stuck to the simple truth. I did not do it. I answered every question calmly and directly. I denied everything. But without evidence to back it up, my words were just the desperate pleas of a guilty woman. The closing arguments were brutal. The prosecutor painted me as a cold, calculating thief, driven by jealousy. Mr. Harrison's closing argument was subdued. He simply stated that the prosecution had not met its burden of proof, that the evidence was purely circumstantial, and that there was reasonable doubt. It wasn't enough. I knew it. He knew it. The whole point was for it not to be enough. We went back to the defendant's table to await the verdict. My father and brother were sitting in the front row of the gallery, my mother between them. She looked pale and sick. My father had his hand on the back of her neck. A gesture that might have looked comforting to a stranger, but I knew it for what it was. A restraint. A warning. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. It was a terrible sign. When they filed back in, their faces were grim and set. They wouldn't look at me. The foreman handed the slip of paper to the bailiff, who gave it to the judge. The room was utterly silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, a frantic drum against my ribs. Mr. Harrison put a steadying hand on my shoulder. The judge read the paper. His face was impassive. He looked at me. On the charge of grand larceny and computer fraud, we, the jury, find the defendant, Clara Thorne. He paused. In that single, eternal second, I saw my father smile. A small, tight, triumphant smile. Guilty. The word hit me like a physical force. Even though I was expecting it, it stole the air from my lungs. I saw my future collapse. The prison cell. The record that would follow me forever. The life my father had chosen for me. And then it happened. A strangled cry from the gallery. A chair scraping loudly against the floor. And my mother's voice, raw and piercing, screaming the words that changed everything. I did it! The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, shouting for order. My father spun around, his face contorted in a mask of rage. He grabbed my mother's arm, trying to pull her back down, but she shook him off. I did it, she screamed again, her eyes locked on the judge. She's innocent. It was me. Mr. Harrison was on his feet instantly. Your Honor, in light of this dramatic and unexpected confession, I must move for an immediate mistrial. The prosecutor was shouting objections. My father was hissing at my mother, his face purple with rage. What are you doing? Sit down, Helen. But she ignored him. She was looking at me now, tears streaming down her face. It was a confession born of a guilty conscience and a mother's desperate last-ditch effort to save her child. It was also completely false. And it was about to derail my entire plan. I felt a surge of panic. This was not how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be a silent, shamed witness to their downfall, not the star of her own self-immolation. Mr. Harrison, however, was a master of chaos. He saw the opening my mother had created, not as a problem, but as an opportunity. Your Honor, he boomed, his voice cutting through the noise. Not only do we have a courtroom confession from a new party, but we have new evidence that was deliberately concealed from the defense. Evidence that will not only exonerate my client, but will point to a conspiracy to frame her, orchestrated by the prosecution's key witnesses. That got the judge's attention. The gavel came down again, harder this time. "Counselor, approach the bench." The prosecutor and Mr. Harrison hurried forward. I could see my father trying to physically drag my mother out of the courtroom, but a bailiff stepped in, blocking his path. Mark was frozen, his face ashen. He looked like a boy who had just seen a ghost. I couldn't hear what they were saying at the bench, but I saw Mr. Harrison hand the judge a flash drive. The same flash drive that held the recording of my father's phone call with Arthur Vance. The judge took it, his expression grim. He spoke to the bailiff, who then escorted my mother, gently but firmly, to a seat in the witness waiting area. She was sobbing uncontrollably. My father stood there, momentarily forgotten. His authority vanished. He just looked small and furious. The judge returned to his seat. He looked out over the chaotic courtroom. "This court will come to order," he commanded, his voice a thunderclap that finally silenced the room. He looked at the prosecutor. He looked at Mr. Harrison. Then his eyes settled on my father and Mark in the front row. "In light of recent developments, this court is in recess. The jury is dismissed with the court's thanks. A new hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to address a motion for a mistrial and the introduction of new evidence. Mr. Robert Thorne and Mr. Mark Thorne, you are ordered to remain. You are not to leave the jurisdiction. Your passports are to be surrendered to the clerk of courts by the end of the day." My father's face went slack with shock. The color drained from Mark's. The trap had been sprung. Not in the way I had planned, but it was sprung nonetheless. My mother's desperate act had thrown a wrench in the works, but Mr. Harrison had used it to pry the whole machine apart. As the courtroom cleared, my father and Mark were surrounded by lawyers. I saw my father jabbing a finger in the air, his face red with fury. Mark just stood there, looking lost. Mr. Harrison came back to the table. He let out a long, slow breath. "Well," he said, "that was not according to the script. My mother—" I started, my voice trembling. "What will happen to her?" "She'll be questioned," he said. "They'll see quickly enough that her confession is false. She doesn't know any of the details of the crime. She was acting out of guilt and panic. The real story is what's on that flash drive. The judge is listening to it in his chambers right now." He looked over at my father and brother. "They thought they were untouchable," he said quietly. "They're about to learn a very hard lesson." I felt a wave of dizziness. The guilty verdict, my mother's scream, the judge's order. It was all a whirlwind, but through it all, one thing was clear. The balance of power had shifted. The ground had crumbled beneath my father's feet. Later that evening, I was back in my apartment with Sarah. She had been in the back of the courtroom and had seen the whole thing. She held my hand as I recounted the blur of events. "I can't believe your mom did that," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "She was trying to save me," I said, "in the only way she knew how, by sacrificing herself. It's the family way, I guess." My phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison. "The judge has listened to the recording," he said, his voice grim but satisfied. "He has granted the motion for a mistrial. The verdict is vacated. Furthermore, he has referred the matter to the State Attorney General's office for an immediate investigation into your father and brother for conspiracy, perjury, and obstruction of justice." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me in a powerful wave. "So it's over? For you, the worst is over," he said. "For them, it's just beginning. The recording is undeniable. Combined with the email you found and the financial trail to Arthur Vance, it's an open and shut case. They are going to be arrested, Clara." Arrested. My father and my brother. The words felt foreign, impossible. But they were real. "What about my mom?" I asked again. "She was questioned and released," he said. "Her story was full of holes. They knew she was covering for someone, but they thought she was covering for you. Now they know the truth. She's a material witness, but she's not a target of the investigation. I hung up the phone and fell back against the couch. Sarah put her arm around me. "You did it," she whispered. "You won." I did win, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an earthquake that had leveled my entire world. I had my freedom, but I had lost my family. Or maybe I had just finally admitted to myself that I never really had one to begin with. The next morning, the news was everywhere. The promising young tech CEO and his influential father arrested in a shocking courtroom drama. The story of the frame-up, the secret recording, it was all laid bare. The family name my father was so desperate to protect was now synonymous with disgrace. My mother called me a dozen times. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what I would even say to her. "Thank you for trying to go to jail for me? Why didn't you just tell the truth from the start?" A few days later, there was a knock on my door. It was her. She looked smaller, older. The fight had gone out of her. "Clara, please," she said, her voice hoarse. "Just let me talk to you for 5 minutes." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. She stood awkwardly in the middle of my small living room. "I'm so sorry," she began, the words tumbling out. I was a coward. I was so afraid of him, of what he would do. He told me it was the only way, that Mark would go to prison, that everything would be ruined. He said you were strong enough to handle it. "I know what he said, Mom," I said quietly. "I heard the recording." She flinched, a fresh wave of shame washing over her face. "He controlled everything, Clara. My whole life. I didn't know how to say no. But when I saw you sitting there, when they said that word, guilty, something inside me just broke. I couldn't let them do it to you. I couldn't be that person anymore." "So you decided to lie for me?" I asked, the question sharper than I intended. "Another lie? To cover up their lies? That's not bravery, Mom. That's just more of the same." Tears welled in her eyes. I know you're right. I didn't know what else to do. I just knew I couldn't watch my baby go down for something she didn't do. Not for them." I looked at her, at this woman who had been a ghost in her own life for so long. I saw the flicker of the person she might have been before my father had extinguished her light. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound, aching sadness. "I need time, Mom," I said, my voice softening. "A lot of time. I don't know if I can ever look at you and not see all the moments you chose him over me. I don't know how to get past that." She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand," she whispered. I want you to know. I am so proud of you. You were braver than all of us put together. You fought back. I never knew how to do that." She turned and left without another word. I watched her go, the gulf between us wider than ever. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. My father and Mark, faced with the undeniable evidence against them, took a plea deal. The very thing they had tried to force on me. They pleaded guilty to conspiracy and perjury. My father, as the mastermind, received a sentence of 5 years in a federal prison. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed. Mark, for his role, got 3 years of probation and a crippling fine that bankrupted his already failing company. He was disgraced, his career over before it had truly begun. The family name was in ruins. The beautiful brick house was sold to pay legal fees and fines. My father's empire, built on a foundation of pride and secrets, had crumbled to dust. As part of the legal settlement, the charges against me were officially expunged. The court also ruled that a portion of my father's frozen assets that were not tied to his criminal activities, should be transferred to me as restitution for the damages I had suffered. It was a significant amount of money, enough to start over, completely. I talked to Sarah about it. "It feels like blood money," I told her. "It's not blood money," she said firmly. "It's justice money. It's the price they paid for what they did to you. You didn't ask for it, but you deserve it. Use it to build a life they can't touch. And that's what I decided to do. I packed up my small apartment. I sold everything I owned except for a few sentimental items. I said goodbye to Sarah, promising to stay in close touch. And then I left. I bought a one-way ticket to a city on the other side of the country, a place where no one knew my name or my story. I found a small house with a garden, the kind of house I had always dreamed of. I started my graphic design business again, from scratch. Life became quiet again. Simple. I worked. I gardened. I made new friends who knew me only as Clara, the woman who was new in town. The past was a scar, but it was no longer an open wound. A few months after I moved, a letter arrived. It was from my mother. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. My first instinct was to throw it away. But I opened it. The letter was short. It wasn't an apology or a plea for forgiveness. It was just a few lines. Clara, it read, I hope this letter finds you well. I don't know where you are, and I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to tell you something I should have told you your whole life. You are not just strong. You are good. You have a goodness in you that your father and brother could never understand, and that I was too weak to protect. I hope you are building a beautiful life. You deserve it. I read the letter, and for the first time since that horrible day in the courtroom, I cried. I cried for the mother I never had, for the family that had been a mirage. And I cried for the girl who had always tried to be good enough, who had finally learned that she already was. I folded the letter and put it in a box with my old photos. It was a piece of my past, but it no longer had the power to hurt me. My father wanted to save the family name. Instead, I was the only one left with a name worth having. Standing in my new home, looking out at a future that was entirely my own, I finally felt free. They had meant to make me a sacrifice. They never imagined I would become the reckoning. And in the quiet of my new life, that knowledge was the only victory that mattered. The process of rebuilding was slower than I expected. Freedom was a vast, open space, and for a while I felt lost in it. In my old life, my actions were always framed by my family's expectations. I was either living up to them or falling short. Now there was no frame. It was just me. I started taking long walks in the mornings. The city I had moved to was full of parks and greenways. I'd watch people walking their dogs, couples pushing strollers, friends laughing on benches. I was an observer, an outsider. And for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. My business grew slowly by word of mouth. My work was good and my prices were fair. I enjoyed the simple satisfaction of a job well done, of a happy client. It was a clean, uncomplicated success. It was mine. One day, about a year after the trial, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. Hello? I said. Clara? The voice was hesitant, unfamiliar. It's Mark. I froze. I hadn't heard his voice in over a year. It sounded different, thinner, weaker. What do you want, Mark? I asked, my voice flat. He was quiet for a moment. I could hear him take a shaky breath. I know I have no right to call you, but I'm out now. Probation. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Sorry? I repeated the word. It sounded absurd. You're sorry you destroyed my life? Or you're sorry you got caught? Both, he said, his voice cracking. No, that's not right. At first, I was just sorry I got caught. I was so angry. At Dad. At Mom for screaming in the courtroom. Even at you for having that recording. It was crazy. I was a mess. I said nothing, letting him talk. But being on probation, losing everything, it gives you a lot of time to think. I lost my company, my friends, my future. I have nothing, Clara. I'm living in a tiny apartment above a garage. I work at a call center. They mock my name when they think I can't hear. There was no satisfaction in hearing this. just a dull, empty ache. He had been my brother, my hero once when we were kids. I kept replaying it all in my head. He continued. What Dad said. What we did. He told me it was a business decision. A hard choice to save the family. He made it sound so logical. So necessary. And I was weak enough to believe him. I wanted to believe him. Because the alternative was admitting I was a failure. That I had run the company into the ground. So you chose to make me a criminal instead, I said, the ice returning to my voice. Yes, he whispered. And I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. I look in the mirror and I see a monster. The person you must have seen when you looked at me on the witness stand. He started to cry then, not the performative tears from the trial, but ugly, ragged sobs. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to hear it from me. It wasn't just Dad. I was a part of it. I was a coward. And I am so, so sorry, Clara. For everything. I listened to him cry. A younger version of me would have felt pity, would have felt the urge to comfort him. But that version of me was gone. She had died in that courtroom. Goodbye, Mark, I said, and I hung up the phone. I blocked his number. The call shook me. It brought the past rushing back in a way that my mother's letter hadn't. Her letter was about me. Mark's call was about him. It was a plea for his own absolution, something I had no interest in giving him. I talked to Sarah about it that night. Wow, she said after I told her the story. So the golden boy finally hit rock bottom. It sounds like it, I said. How do you feel? She asked. I had to think about it for a moment. Empty, I finally said. I thought I would feel vindicated, happy even, but I just feel tired. I'm tired of their drama. I'm glad I'm here and he's there. That's all. That's not a small thing, Clara, she said gently. That's peace. That's what you fought for. She was right. The absence of their constant presence in my life, the quiet, was the real prize. A few weeks later, another ghost from the past appeared. I got an email from Mr. Harrison. The subject was final update. He informed me that my father's appeal had been denied. His sentence was confirmed. He would serve the full 5 years. The email was professional and to the point, but at the end, he added a personal note. Clara, I hope you're doing well. Your case was a turning point for me. It reminded me why I became a lawyer in the first place. You showed incredible courage. If you ever need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out. I wrote him back a short, sincere note of thanks. He had been more than a lawyer. He had been an ally when I had none. Life settled back into its quiet rhythm. The seasons changed. I made a couple of close friends in my new city. I joined a book club. I adopted a cat from the local shelter, a scruffy orange tabby I named Leo. For the first time, my home felt truly full. One day, I was at a local farmer's market buying vegetables for the week. I was chatting with the farmer, a friendly woman named Maria, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned. It was a man I didn't recognize, about my age, with kind eyes and a warm smile. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, but I saw your tote bag. You're a graphic designer? I looked down at the bag I had designed for myself, which had my business logo on it. I am, I said, smiling. I'm Ben, he said. I'm starting a small coffee shop downtown, and I'm in desperate need of a good logo. Your style looks exactly like what I've been looking for. We talked for a while. He was passionate about his new business, his eyes lighting up as he described his vision. He was easy to talk to. For the first time since everything happened, I felt a spark of interest in someone. A genuine, uncomplicated connection. We exchanged numbers. He became my client, and then, slowly, he became my friend. And then, one sunny afternoon, he became something more. Our first date was a walk in the park, the same park where I had felt so much like an outsider a year before. But this time, I wasn't alone. I was holding his hand. He knew a vague version of my past. I had told him that I had a difficult falling out with my family and had moved to start over. He never pressed for details. He just accepted it, and accepted me. "Whatever happened back there," he said to me one evening as we were sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, "it made you who you are. And I really like who you are." I knew then that I could tell him the whole story. And one night, I did. I told him everything. The frame-up, the email, the recording, the trial. He listened patiently, his expression growing more serious with every word. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Your father and brother," he said finally, his voice tight with anger. "I have no words for what they did. And your mother, what a terrible position to be in." He pulled me closer. "But you, Clara, what you did, the way you fought back, the strength that must have taken, I'm in awe of you." He wasn't in awe of my ability to endure suffering. He was in awe of my fight. He saw the wolf, not the lamb. And in that moment, I felt a final, deep-seated knot of tension in my soul finally release. I was not defined by what they did to me. I was defined by what I did in response. Years passed. My business thrived. Ben's coffee shop became a beloved local institution. We got married in my garden, a small ceremony with just a few close friends. Sarah flew in to be my maid of honor. She hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. "Look at you," she said, beaming. "You got your happy ending." "It's a happy beginning," I corrected her. I never heard from Mark again. I learned through a public records search that my father was released from prison after serving his time. He went to live with a distant cousin in another state, a broken and forgotten man. I never knew if he felt remorse. I never cared to find out. My mother continued to send me a letter once a year on my birthday. They were always short, never asking for anything. She would tell me about her life. She had moved into a small apartment of her own. She had gotten a part-time job at a library. She was taking a painting class. She was, in her own quiet way, building a life for herself, free from my father's shadow. I never wrote back. The wound was too deep. The years of her silence had been too loud. But I kept the letters. They were a reminder that even in the darkest of places, a person could change, that it was never too late to try to find your own voice. One day, when Ben and I were expecting our first child, I was cleaning out a closet and found the box with her letters. I sat on the floor and read them all in order. They told a story of a woman slowly coming back to life. Ben found me there, surrounded by the papers. He sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. "I'm thinking about forgiveness," I said. "Not for them, not for my father or my brother. That's impossible, but for her." I looked at him, my eyes filled with a question I hadn't let myself ask before. Is it possible to forgive someone, even if you can't forget? "I think so," he said. "I think forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about letting go of the weight of it. For you, not for them." That night, for the first time in almost a decade, I wrote a letter back to my mother. It was just as short as hers. "Mom," I wrote, "I'm doing well. I'm happy. I'm about to have a child of my own. I hope you are finding peace. Maybe one day you can meet your grandchild." I sent the letter without knowing if it was the right thing to do, but it felt right. It felt like the final brick being laid in the new life I had built. A life not of revenge, but of resilience. A life where the past was a part of my story, but it no longer held the pen. The future was mine to write, and it was going to be beautiful. Life with Ben was a quiet joy. He was my partner in every sense of the word. We built our lives together, brick by brick, with honesty and mutual respect. When our daughter Lily was born, I felt a love so fierce and protective it took my breath away. Holding her in my arms, I understood my mother's desperate courtroom scream on a level I never could have before. It was the primal, illogical cry of a parent trying to shield their child from harm. It didn't excuse her years of complicity, but it cast them in a new, more tragic light. We decided not to hide my past from Lily. When she was old enough to understand, we would tell her the story. Not to burden her with it, but to teach her about resilience, about standing up for yourself, and about the complex, messy reality of families. We wanted her to know that life isn't always a fairy tale, but that you can write your own happy ending. A few months after Lily was born, a package arrived. It was from my mother. There was no return address, but I recognized the postmark from her town. Inside, there was a small, beautifully painted watercolor of a field of wildflowers. There was also a baby blanket, hand-knitted in a soft yellow yarn, and a short, simple note. For Lily. I am so happy for you, Clara. More than words can say. All my love, Mom. I held the blanket. It was soft and warm. It was made with love. I showed it to Ben. What do you want to do? He asked, his voice gentle. He knew what a loaded object this was. I thought about throwing it away. I thought about putting it in a box, another relic of a past I wanted to keep at a distance. But then I looked at the painting. It was full of light and color. It was the work of someone who was finding beauty in the world again. We'll keep it, I said. Lily can use it. It felt like a small step across a vast canyon. Not a full reconciliation, but an acknowledgement. An acknowledgement that she was trying, and that I was willing to see it. Life continued. My business expanded, and I hired my first employee. Ben's coffee shop opened a second location. We were busy, happy, and grounded in the life we had built. The drama of my past felt like a story about someone else, a movie I had once seen. One day, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject was a question about Robert Thorne. My heart did a familiar, cold flip. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. The email was from a young journalist. He was writing a long-form piece about corporate crime and the human cost of it. He had stumbled upon my family's case and was fascinated by the story. He wanted to interview me. I talked it over with Ben. My first instinct was to say no. I didn't want to dredge it all up again. I had my piece, and I didn't want to disturb it. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, he said. But think about it. You spent all that time being silenced. This is a chance to tell your story, in your own words, not as a victim, but as the person who brought the truth to light. He had a point. My father and brother had tried to write my story for me. The media had told their version of it. But I had never truly told it myself, from start to finish. I agreed to a phone interview with the journalist on the condition of anonymity. I didn't want my new life connected to my old one. He agreed. We talked for hours. I told him everything, just as I had told Ben. I spoke about the years of being the family scapegoat, the cold calculation of the frame-up, the discovery of the evidence, and the terrifying decision to let the guilty verdict happen. He was a good listener, and he asked thoughtful questions. At the end of the interview, he sounded moved. Thank you, he said. This is an incredible story of betrayal, but it's also one of the most powerful stories of personal justice I've ever heard. You didn't just wait for the system to save you. You saved yourself. When the article was published, it was a sensation. It was a deep, nuanced look at a family's toxic dynamics and the devastating consequences of pride and deceit. Even though my name wasn't used, Sarah called me the day it came out. I just read it, she said, her voice full of emotion. Clara, it's perfect. It's the truth. The whole truth. Reading the article, I felt a sense of finality. The story was now out in the world, told correctly. It was no longer my secret burden to carry. It was a cautionary tale for others. A few years later, when Lily was a toddler, I got a call from a hospital in my mother's town. She had had a stroke. She was in intensive care. The hospital had found my number listed as her emergency contact. Ben and I packed a bag immediately. We left Lily with our trusted neighbors and drove the 6 hours to the town my mother now called home. It was a strange, surreal journey back into a world I had left behind. We found her in the ICU. She was small and frail in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines. She was conscious, but her speech was slurred, and the left side of her body was weak. She saw me, and her eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak my name. "It's okay, Mom," I said, taking her hand. It felt fragile in mine. "We're here." We stayed for a week. I talked to her doctors. I sat by her bedside. I showed her pictures of Lily on my phone. She would smile, a lopsided, heartbreaking smile. In those quiet hospital room hours, we didn't talk about the past. There was no need. The anger and resentment I had held onto for so long had faded, replaced by a simple human compassion for this woman who had suffered so much, both at the hands of others and by her own weakness. Her recovery was slow. It became clear she would not be able to live on her own anymore. She would need to go to a long-term care facility. Ben and I found a good one near our home. It was a difficult decision, but it was the only one. We arranged for her to be transferred. The day she moved in, I helped her unpack her few belongings in her new room. She had her paintings, her books, and the framed photo I had sent her of Lily. As I was putting her clothes in the closet, I found a small, worn wooden box. Inside was a collection of my childhood drawings, a lock of my baby hair, and my first report card. Things a mother keeps. Things I thought had been lost when the house was sold. I held the box, the weight of all the lost years pressing down on me. She had never really let me go. Even in her silence, she had held on to the memory of the daughter she loved. I looked at her, sitting in her wheelchair by the window. She was watching me, her eyes clear. "I kept them," she said, her voice slow but steady. "I always kept them." I walked over to her and, for the first time since I was a child, I hugged her. She felt so fragile. She began to cry, quiet, exhausted tears. "I'm sorry, Clara," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry I wasn't a better mother." "I know, Mom," I whispered back. "I know." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't forgetting. It was just acceptance. An acceptance of the flawed, broken, and beautiful complexity of being human. My mother lived in the care facility for 3 more years. We visited her every weekend. Lily got to know her grandmother. She would sit on her lap and show her drawings, and my mother would smile, her eyes full of a light I had never seen before. She was at peace. When she passed away, it was quietly in her sleep. We had a small service for her. Ben, Lily, and me. Sarah came. I read a poem. We scattered her ashes in the rose garden at the facility, a place she had loved to sit. Afterward, as we were driving home, Lily, now a bright and curious 7-year-old, asked a question from the back seat. "Mommy, was Grandma a good person?" I looked at Ben. He gave me a small, supportive nod. "She was complicated, sweetie," I said. "People are. She made some big mistakes, but she had a good heart, and she loved you very much. And she loved me. In the end, she learned to be brave. And that's a very good thing to be." That felt like the truest thing I could say. It was the end of a long and painful chapter. But it was not the end of my story. My story was here, in this car, with the family I had chosen, the family I had built. My father served his time and disappeared into obscurity. My brother struggled, a ghost of his former self, forever paying the price for his weakness. Their world had ended. Mine had just begun. They had built a cage for me out of lies and betrayal. But they had underestimated me. They didn't realize I wasn't the one who was trapped. They were. I had the truth. And the truth I had learned was not just a key. It was a weapon. It was a shield. And ultimately, it was the one thing that had set me free. My life was a testament to that freedom. A quiet, beautiful, and hard-won victory. And it was all mine.